All right. Can everybody hear and see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
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 Perfect.
Yes.
All right. I'm trying to admit someone from the lobby, but it's taking forever for some reason.
I can hear, but I can't see.
Who said that they can't see? Oh, because
Patty.
you're on your phone. All right. Well, hopefully you can.
Well, I'm trying to be online, but it's not connecting for some reason.
Do you need me to send you the link again?
Well,
Let me try to send it to you again,
here we
because
go.
I have a
Maybe
lot of
maybe
pictures and videos
yeah.
that I'm sure you would like to see.
Okay, let's see what this is.
I know I have the link
Saying
here.
it's downloading Microsoft Teams, which I thought I already had that on here.
It doesn't let you just join from the internet? There wasn't like an option to join online?
It used to. I don't know what's going on.
Huh. Well, I'm recording it, so.
Okay. Well, if I miss them, I'll go back.
Okay. Back here. Okay, my PowerPoint should be back. Okay. So, welcome to today's Lunch and Learn. Today, I'm going to be talking to you guys about good bugs and bad bugs and kind of how we can approach controlling them. Every time. Okay. So first off, try to call them insects, not bugs, the best you can. There is a specific order of true bugs, and so if you're talking about a beetle, it's technically not a bug. My entomology professor used to get after us if we called anything a bug that wasn't a true bug. And so I just included this fun picture from when I was in college and holding a Madagascar cockroach. We were having races. That's what we do in the ag college is we have races with roaches. So I got to hold one. I actually dropped it shortly after this, and I almost started crying because I felt so bad, but thankfully she was hardy and fine.
Gross.
Yeah. So kind of going into a little bit of how to identify what insect is what. I think that's the biggest way to help any gardener or just any person kind of know what they're dealing with. It's kind of like a doctor, you want to diagnose what it is. And if you're diagnosing a virus and it's a bacteria, they're just completely different approaches to controlling them. So I like to kind of give a little bit of a basics on looking at something in some really quick ways to figure out what you're dealing with. In my entomology class, we had to learn the Latin names of everything, and we would have quizzes where we'd come in and my professor would have all these microscopes out, and we'd have to look on the microscope and we'd have to put down the Latin name, common name, kind of what each thing means. So I am passing on that information now. I have a picture here of a beetle, and that's going to be in what is called the Coleoptera. And that translates directly to sheath wing, and that's because you have a literal sheath right here, which is that kind of harder outer shell that lifts up, and then their fleshy wings come out. So if you've ever seen a ladybug, which I'm sure all of you should have, that is in a Coleoptera because they have a sheath wing. So anything you see that kind of reveals its wings from underneath a harder shell, Coleoptera. Think Coleoptera, and those will be the beetles. Diptera stands for two wings, so anything you see with two wings, very easy. That's going to be in Diptera. That's going to be all your flies, pretty much, your mosquitoes. There are a lot of insects that are mimics of bees, but bees are in Hymenoptera and actually have four wings. So if you see something and you're like, oh, that kind of looks like a bee, and then you get a little bit of a closer look and you see that it only has two wings, it's actually a fly that is a mimic, and it's just trying to get away with looking scarier than it actually is. So don't kill them. And then Hemiptera. So these are actually the true bugs that I was talking to you about at the beginning. And so Hemiptera actually stands for half wing, and that's because they have a half membranous wing and a half hard wing. And the easiest way to figure out if you're looking at a true bug is they have kind of this X shape on their back is the best way I can describe it. You can kind of see it really good here on this stink bug. Um, so when their wings open up, it's only membranous and fleshy kind of down here, and then it's hard up here. And so when it folds over, it kind of creates this like X or V shape, kind of whatever is easier for you to see with your naked eye. And kind of once you kind of start learning about all this stuff, you kind of start noticing, because a lot of people would see this and think, oh, it's probably like a beetle, but it's actually a Hemiptera, so it's a true bug. And these are going to be like your assassin bugs, your stink bugs, and these also are going to kind of be known for having sucking mouth parts. So they have this little straw thing that they kind of whip out, and they pierce a lot of plant tissue. So if you've got stink bug issue, you're going to notice it's like polka dots as opposed to, say, some type of beetles. Beetles have chewing mouth parts, and you're going to notice more little chewing damage. So that's another way to kind of figure out what you're dealing with and how you're going to have to approach handling these pests. Hymenoptera, like I said earlier, when I was talking about the flies, a lot of Hymenoptera, which is membranous wing because their whole wing is fleshy. So think about wasps and bees. They also are going to have a pinched abdomen. So think about how the bees have that little, very tiny little area in their abdomen, as well as wasps. And so a lot of flies are going to look like this family, but these have 4 wings instead of 2 and can sting you. Mantidea means prophet type, and this one is a little bit self-explanatory. It's just a praying mantis, and that one's not too hard to remember for identification and what you're dealing with. Lepidoptera stands for scale wing, and I have included a really pretty nice close-up picture here of a butterfly's wing, and actually what kind of creates those really pretty designs on their wings are like tiny little scales they have. And so when you touch their wings and that powdery stuff that comes off, it's their little scales that you're kind of brushing off. So just be careful when handling anything in this family. So this is going to be your butterflies and your moths. Odonata stands for tooth wing. This one kind of doesn't make like too much sense. I think when I was looking it up, it was saying that they initially gave it a tooth named because of their mouth parts looked like teeth, but it just kind of carried on, and it's kind of how the Latin names work in science. But these are going to be your dragonflies and your damselflies. And so kind of the way I think about it is orthodontists tooth wings, and the orthodontist wants to straighten your teeth, and a lot of the dragonflies and damselflies, their wings are straight out to the sides when they're flying. So kind of how I remember that. Thysanoptera, so this stands for fringed wing, and these are going to be your thrips. And these are annoying little tiny things. They are like the size of like a piece of pepper, like a little pepper, like if you got your pepper shaker, like they're that small. These are going to be like in your roses. I know I had to collect them for class, and so I would go to the rose bushes at school, and you get a white piece of paper and you just smack the flower, and they're going to fall directly onto it, and they're just these beige little colored tiny little things, and you're going to see them running around, and you got to put them into a vial of alcohol, and when you get them under a microscope, they're actually quite interesting to look at because they're so detailed for how tiny they are. But they are called fringe wings because, as you can see here, they do have tiny little wings that just look like shredded fringe. So that was kind of my intro into the basics of what I think you should need to know for what you're probably going to be seeing in your garden, and an easy way to identify if you've got a beetle or you've got a true bug. I mean, you should know hopefully what a butterfly looks like different than a beetle. But I want to go into a little bit and ask you guys, what would you classify as beneficial? And what would you try to kill and what would you not try to kill? I know if some of you are on the phone, you probably can't see what I have up right now, but if anyone is looking, so I have that top picture of this weird little looking worm thing with all its legs, and then I have a ladybug down here. Does anyone want to say what they feel like they would try to kill and what they would try to keep?
Keep both.
Keep both is what Patty says. Does anyone else want to be brave and try to guess? So Patty saved you all. Someone usually says, get rid of that top thing. It looks so ugly. That looks like it's bad. They're actually the same thing. I was trying to trick you. So this is actually the immature version of this. So this is a baby ladybug pretty much. And they really look kind of gnarly when they're not adults. Like that looks like something kind of scary and foreign. But they are actually so efficient at killing aphids. They are called, I think they're called like aphid lions when they're little because they are so efficient at killing aphids. So you want to keep those around. So sometimes people will be like, oh, lady beetles are efficient. I'm going to buy a bunch of them and release them into my garden, and then they just fly away. So you actually kind of want to get the immature version because they are way more efficient. And I have a video here. Typically, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Is that working and can we hear everything?
I could see it.
Oh, there.
There we go.
So as you can see, it's just chewing up that aphid very efficiently.
I didn't know it had little spiky things on it.
Yeah, it can. They're pretty, that's what I'm saying. They're pretty gnarly looking when they're
like
immature.
alligators.
They what?
They look like alligators.
Yeah, they don't look very fun. But if you see these, leave them. They're helping you. They're there to help you. They will eat anything they find. But just a little fun thing there. But yeah, so they're really effective and they can consume up to 50 a day as an adult. And there is another type of lady beetle called the seven-spotted lady beetle, and the adult can dine on several hundred aphids daily, and the larva can eat about 200 to 300 daily as it develops. And I just have these really fun ladybug cartoons here on the side because it's like, oh, I love watching ladybugs. They're so peaceful and calm, and they're actually pretty brutal because they're eating all the aphids, which is good for us because aphids are annoying.
Yes, they are.
Very annoying. Here is an antlion. They're going to kind of be doing a similar thing as the ladybug. They have these really aggressive looking mouth parts, and they grow up to be this beautiful looking kind of dragonfly looking thing. They're not dragonflies though. Don't ask me the nomenclature of it though, because I do not know it. But I think I have another video of this one.
Those emotions, they were put on hold by time, by
a sandy wasteland. Its savage ruler lies hidden beneath the sand. Its presence revealed only by catapulted corpses. The grisly remains of discarded victims. Empty shells of insects, murdered and tossed aside. But by what? By this, the antlion, the spawn of the netherworld. This is its lair. Digging backwards in the sand, the antlion creates a funnel-shaped burrow. Then, it buries itself to lie in wait for its next victim. The ants have no idea that a trap lies below. A firebug loses its grip on the sand and slips down the funnel into waiting jaws. Once he pulls his catch into the sand, The antlion injects it with poison and digestive enzymes and sucks out its liquefied guts. Then it throws the empty bug shell up, and away. If the victims don't slide down on their own, the antlion launches an assault. Only makes matters worse. Finally, the assassin reaches up to make the kill, injecting its toxic cocktail. Resistance is futile. Once you've fallen into the lion's den, there's only one way for this horror story to end.
You guys are able to hear, right? Like the commentary and the sound effects. Okay. Finally figured that out. I've given this presentation a couple times, and Microsoft Teams sometimes doesn't share the sound, and the sound really adds to the dramatic. But yeah, so this is another really cool insect. I think some people call them doodle bugs. I didn't grow up with really having any of them around where I lived, but I know if you kind of poke a stick in there, they'll kind of poke out if you find those little dens that they kind of burrow in the sand. But they are efficient at killing anything, so we like them. A green lacewing is going to be similar to kind of a mix of the antlion and the aphid, not the aphid, the ladybug, because they really like to eat aphids as well. Their eggs kind of look a little interesting. This is also how they look as adults, so it's another one that looks a little ugly when it's an immature, and then it grows up to be this beautiful insect. But they lay their eggs on stalks. So if you're ever in your garden and you see these hanging stalks, that is a lacewing. Please leave it alone. It's going to help you. It's going to eat those aphids for you. I think as you can tell, I really like spending time watching videos about insects. I think this is just showing them eating as well. Okay, it just turns into an ad, and we're not trying to be an ad, but I just thought that was a really good video. But yeah, they also have those really cool sickle-shaped jaws, and those are going to be piercing into the aphid, and they're going to digest it into, they inject their enzyme, kind of digest it in there, and then they suck it out like straws. It's pretty gross, but they're really efficient. So, so if you see those, sorry, I inhaled wrong. If you see those in your garden, do not get rid of them. All right. Assassin bug, like I said, these are going to actually be bugs. There are good ones and bad ones with this. These are what is also known as kissing bugs that will bite humans and leave you with those kind of nasty little rash. But these green ones are plant ones that are going to be eating they're kind of going to be eating everything in your garden. So these are good and bad, but they're also really efficient killers. And some of them have sticky legs. So as they walk around, some like insects will get stuck to them, and they'll just pick up their leg and kind of chew on their little snack and then go on their way. So they're very interesting. I have a video for a lot of these. I really like entomology. So it's one of my favorite classes in college.
Knowing that the reserves were there for me, I could still be a part of something that I love, but also I can start the second life.
So you can kind of see their like beak shaped thing that I was talking to you about, and this is what they, so if you looked at this, you'd think, oh, it's a beetle, but this is that sucking mouth part I was talking to you about. As compared to like a beetle, they have those two little mandibles that are going to be chewing.
While he may look comical with his strange long nose, the assassin bug is no laughing matter. This freak has the ability to literally liquefy his prey. His red color is not just for show. It's a warning to other predators. With antennae as long as his body, he sniffs out his next meal. And his needle-like beak can inflict a painful sting. Once a tasty meal has been targeted, the silent assassin grabs hold. Once he finds a soft spot, he stabs his blade-like proboscis into his victim. Within seconds, the prey is paralyzed and its insides begin to dissolve. The proboscis pierces the victim's gut, injecting a lethal cocktail of enzymes and digestive juices. This venomous saliva destroys everything in its path, turning the cells into soup. Once the bug puree is ready, the assassin slurps it all up, back through his deadly straw. Most bugs that feed this way have two separate tubes, one for injecting and one for sucking. But the assassin's beak acts as both syringe and siphon, which allows it to target large prey twice its own size.
So they add a lot of really dramatic sound effects. I'm sure it doesn't sound like it's eating a Slurpee in nature, but I thought that one was really good because it kind of gives you a really good demonstration of how they have their digestive enzymes, and it breaks everything down and sucks it back up. So they're efficient. I leave them when I see them, when they're like these green ones. But if you see, of course, anything in nature, red coloring usually means bad. So like the red and the black ones, I believe, are the ones that are that give you like the kissing bugs that give that bad rash to some people. Praying mantis, these are honestly just interesting because they can kill small birds and lizards. They'll kind of eat anything, flies, crickets, moths, mosquitoes, but they sometimes will eat your beneficials. So if you do see these, it's kind of up to you if you want to kill them or not. These are pretty brutal because when they're born, I don't know if you've ever seen their kind of egg casing. It's a decent size with a bunch of tiny little holes all around it. And when the first one emerges, it waits for its brothers and sisters to emerge, and it'll eat them as it starts coming out. They're pretty brutal insects. And I have a cool video.
Suddenly's best internet offer just got better. Get 200 meg internet now for only $30 a month. And
Okay.
Because beneath this seemingly benign exterior lies an ambushed predator of blinding speed. Nearly 2,000 species of praying mantises are found around the world, each one an insatiable carnivore, each one capable of killing prey up to 3 times its size. The mantis feeds mostly on living insects, birds, mice, frogs, snakes, lizards, and soft-shelled turtles also cannot escape the deadly speed and precision of the praying mantis. One of its hunting tactics? Blending in. Mantises who live on the ground are spotted gray and brown to blend in with rocks and soil, while those in trees are camouflaged to mimic leaves, flowers, twigs, or bark. This camouflage allows them to sneak imperceptibly towards their prey, stalking like a cat or lying in wait near flowers that insects are likely to visit. The mantis spies its prey with a pair of large compound eyes, made of up to 10,000 miniature eyes. Humans have 2 eyes to distinguish how far away an object is, but the eyes of the mantis are too close together for such depth perception. To compensate, mantises eerily sway their heads back and forth, measuring precisely how their target moves against its background. These brilliant, unblinking predators can even turn their heads backwards to seamlessly track prey in any direction. And once the mantis is on the hunt, all of these elements come into play. Closer it creeps towards its intended victims until it's within striking range, because beneath its limbs hide deadly weapons. Rows of sharp spikes ready to spear its prey. The mantis lashes out with its front legs at unbelievable speed, unleashing a forceful strike with their hooves in only 1/20th of a second, twice as fast as a blink of an eye.
Yeah, so just a little cool video about them. So kind of up to you if you see them. They scare me a little. They're kind of eerie looking. They are pretty strong. I've never been bit by one, but I have been pinched by their little arm pieces, and they're pretty strong. So maybe just don't grab them with your hands. These are hoverflies. So this is one of those bee mimics that I was talking about earlier. It is a fly, but it looks like a bee. So if you count the wings, it only has 2 instead of 4. And these are really good also at eating aphids. The hoverflies are also really good pollinators, so we want to leave those around if you see them in your garden. But of course, we always want to keep pollinators around. This is the Braconid wasp. So here we have a tomato hornworm, and this is a teeny tiny little wasp that lays its eggs, and it parasitizes and feeds on that hornworm from the inside out, and it's pretty gross, but it targets hornworms, and we don't like hornworms, so we can leave those if we see them. But they're really tiny, and you kind of can't see them even with the naked eye. Like, you really have to look. This is another really tiny wasp as well. It's the ensign wasp. It has a really weird, like pinched backside, but these are really, really good for cockroaches. I needed to catch these for my entomology class for my collection, and I went to one of the oldest buildings on campus that was like known for having roaches, and these were everywhere. So they like to parasitize on the cockroaches, and it'll develop inside of the egg cases, and then you won't have any more cockroaches. So if you kind of see a lot of these, you might be in a building that possibly has cockroaches, so just keep that in mind. They're really distinguishable by this weird little backside that they have, but they're just tiny little black wasps. I'm going to go into pollinators really quickly. Not really too much to say if you know a lot about pollinators. Bumblebees, of course, they really don't store a lot of honey, so there's no commercial value for them. And they're really sweet, docile, they're just foraging around. Of course, they're going to be defensive like any animal. And these are capable of stinging you multiple times, so be careful. And they're responsible for about 15% of pollinating of our crops, so they're really fuzzy and cute, so leave them alone. Carpenter bees are really interesting too. They're big as well. These are pretty big. I believe, I can never remember, I think the female does sting you, but the male doesn't. I believe the male is black and the female is more of a brownish color. But they do what's called buzz pollination, like they vibrate while they're on the flower and it kind of puffs up everywhere, so that's really interesting. But they, I feel like, is it on here? I think they're called carpenter bees because they like to live in like wood tunnels. So that's kind of where the carpenter comes out. Like they'll get like a piece of tree or bark or something, and they'll try to burrow in there and they'll kind of live in there. But they're really good pollinators, so leave those around. Everybody knows about butterflies. The really interesting thing of, I'm sure you all have heard about like, oh, plant a butterfly garden, and that's actually because butterflies taste with their feet. And so they're going to be landing on something and they're like, okay, can my larva feed on this? Because a lot of larvas are super specialized, like monarch butterflies. Their larvae like to feed on like milkweed things. So the butterfly will land, taste with her feet. Okay, can I lay my kids here? Can my kids eat whenever they hatch? No? Okay, fly off. So that's why we really want to try to plant things that the butterflies are going to recognize and lay their eggs on. This is an adult tomato hornworm, so they do kind of grow into something pretty. This is a sphinx moth. These are nocturnal. They're really, really cool. When I lived in El Paso, I used to go to Lowe's with my parents, and these were always out at night pollinating everything. I thought it was a hummingbird the first time I saw it because they kind of look like a smaller hummingbird, but they're very pretty as adults, and they're really good pollinators. So it kind of stinks that they're very destructive on tomatoes when they're immature as caterpillars. Of course, the honeybee right here, it's going to be responsible for about 80% of the pollination of fruits, nuts, grains, and vegetables. And they're going to, of course, be giving us honey. And we use them a lot to sell all of the many, many products that they create. A lot of people actually don't know that the male mosquito is a pollinator. They cannot sting you. So if you look right here at the antenna, they kind of have like feathery looking antenna. And so that is a male mosquito. Their antenna look different than the female. So if you've ever been stung or been fed on by a mosquito, it was a female. So the men want nothing to do with that. They just want to pollinate and feed on nectar. So I'm going to go into a couple of pests here. The pecan nutcase bearer, I haven't had too many people call me for this issue. Before I worked here for AgriLife, when I was in college, I worked at a lab, like an entomology lab, and we did pesticide efficacy trials, and we would see so many, like, just issues with pecan nut case bearer in all the pecan orchards we worked in, but those are more kind of commercial. I haven't had too many homeowners call me with this issue, but they're very interesting because as larva, well, the egg will be laid and then it will burrow into the small little nutlet, and what happens is it poops and it plugs up the hole. So that's why it looks like there's coffee grounds right here. So that's a good indicator that you probably have a pecan nut case bearer. But it does emerge into this tiny little moth. And so it's kind of hard to control in home landscapes. There's a lot of things you can do if it's in your like a commercial orchard, because of course you're going to be having a professional come and spray kind of harder stuff. But this is the pecan nut case bearer. If you ever see this on a pecan tree, that's what you probably have. Aphids are just common everywhere. There is the black aphid, which is that damage you're seeing up here. So that there's a tiny little black aphid right there. And what the black aphid is going to be doing is it's going to be piercing its, can't think of the word, but it's going to pierce its mouth part into the leaf, and it's going to digest the plant tissue. And so that's why the leaves lose their color. They get yellow. And it's very interesting because it kind of stays like within the cell of the leaf there. If you see, it's staying in those lines. So that's a black aphid. The yellow aphids and the black margined aphids are going to just be producing honeydew. They don't digest. They just kind of drink and poop at the same time, as opposed to the black aphid that's digesting, kind of breaking down all of the tissue. And if you've ever if you've ever parked your car under a tree in the spring or the summer and it's just covered in sticky stuff, it is honeydew from an aphid. So they're just kind of annoying. It can stunt growth. It can discolor the leaves. They also sometimes transmit diseases to your plants. So we really don't like aphids, which is why I kind of emphasized all those beneficials earlier, because this is kind of a common thing people complain about. Leaf hoppers, they're going to be, these are going to be transmitting a lot of diseases. This is kind of more an issue in crops, but they can do what's called hopper burn, and you'll get yellow browning, stunting, leaf curling, but they are kind of feeding on that plant tissue, and they also have a sucking mouth part because they are a true bug, and they're also very, very tiny. Spider mites, I kind of get calls for these, like with people who have like indoor plants. You know you have them if your plant just doesn't look good, but you'll also kind of see webbing, and you can bring it to me and we can put it under the microscope and we can see if you actually have these little suckers crawling around. But sometimes all you can really do is just say you have one plant in your house that's just infested, and no matter how much you rinse it off, just throw it away. Just quarantine it, stop the spread, get it out of there. Fungal gnats is another annoying one. They really like fungus or just really wet environments. So if you're kind of overwatering, you're going to kind of notice these popping up. It's kind of hard. Just try to not keep it excessively wet. And you can put things on it. I believe like neem oil is a good like organic option, but it's kind of more kind of keep an eye on how wet you're keeping it, so you don't want these fungal gnats to have a happy place. You don't want them to get comfortable. Whitefly is common in cotton. That's the picture I have down here. But the larvae are going to be sucking on the plant juices. It's going to weaken your crop, of course, but they do thrive in dry climates, generally on flowering plants and animals. But the best thing I know a lot of people do is they just kind of spray it down with water. And of course, there are some approved pesticides to control these if that's what you want to do. Slugs and snails. The best thing you can do for these is if you see them, squish them, kill them. They do have slug and snail baits, but just try to keep the area dry. You can usually see their little slime trail and try to track them down and see where they're hiding. If you have an especially wet place in your garden, they're probably there, but they can cause a lot of really gnarly damage. We talked about thrips earlier. These are really good plant disease vectors. And they're also going to be digesting and poking holes But you'll get like that stippling effect on your leaves the same way that the not the thrips, the plant hoppers kind of show you the damage. Flea beetles, these are beetles, so this is kind of what I was talking about when I said chewing damage. So if you're kind of seeing issues like this, you've got some beetles chewing on things. If you irrigate efficiently, drought-stressed plants are more susceptible to being damaged and fed on. You can also plant trap crops, so any type of like mustard plant, they seem to be more attracted to that, so they might leave your plants alone and go somewhere else. Another type of beetle that's going to be showing you some chewing damage. They're going to be feeding on stuff, but they do spread diseases like bacterial wilt, squash mosaic virus, and that can kill your plants. Kind of the easiest thing you can do is try to choose disease-resistant squash plants, or use a trellis to get them off the ground, and mulch heavily around the plant. So just try to keep your plants happy, and it's kind of like your immune system. That's kind of how plants function as well. Squash bugs, stink bugs, whatever you call them, but they are true bugs, so they have that sucking mouth part that they're going to be feeding on all of your plants with. Your damaged leaves are going to look molted with yellow, and they will eventually die, and the plants can also kind of look crispy and dried out and dead with a severe infestation. But you can try to plant resistant varieties or rotate crops, use trellises to keep the growing vines off the ground, make it harder for them to get up there. I think that's more of like an ag crop. Cutworms are kind of more common for like in corn and whatnot, but here's what they look like if you're interested. And they do what they're called. They chew around the base of the stem, pretty much cut the whole plant down, and can't really have anything. They really like tomatoes, broccoli, kale, cabbage. But if you do crop rotation, that should help. Or you can cover the base of the stem with like a toilet paper tube or aluminum foil. And you can also till the garden in autumn to kill anything that might be in the ground hiding. Here is a leaf miner. So when their larvae are inside of the leaf tissue, they're going to create these little mines pretty much. They're kind of in between both the layers of the leaves. The best thing for you to do is if you see leaf miner damage, just pick the leaf off, because the larva more than likely is still in there growing. And it's kind of the easiest thing you can do for leaf miners. Scale is kind of similar to aphids. They also produce honeydew, but these are a little bit harder to treat since they are protected by that little shell. If you spray any pesticide on there, it's not going to get through that shell. So there are systemic pesticides that you can inject like into the base, and the tree will take it up, and then as it feeds on the tree, it will kill it by feeding on that tree tissue. But it's kind of hard if it's on a plant crop, because you're poisoning something you're going to eat. So kind of try to just pick these off if you see them. Nematodes, I hope none of you have nematodes, because they are a pain to get rid of. But you're going to probably see a lot of stunting growth, and when you pull your tree or plant out, you're going to see these like weird growths on the root tissue. Just of course, don't get confused if you have like an alfalfa and you pull the alfalfa up and it has the nodes on it because it's a nitrogen fixing plant. This is completely different. It's like if you have a plant that you know that the roots shouldn't look like that, but they're microscopic, very annoying. They kind of they force the plant to grow excessively so they can feed on it. So they kind of trick the plant, and of course they're feeding on it. They're like a little parasite. But I've heard that French marigold is known to reduce nematode populations if you kind of treat the soil with it. But it is a little hard once you have them. So a little bit about IPM. got like 15 minutes, so I'll try to get through this. But when we're dealing with IPM, it stands for Integrated Pest Management. So we really want to use we want to integrate lots of different methods to control these pests. The goal of IPM isn't to eliminate all the pests, but it's kind of to bring them down to a manageable level because, nature is nature. We want things alive. It's okay. But it is a long-term management strategy that uses a combination of tactics to reduce pests to tolerable levels with potentially lower costs for the pest manager and minimal effects to the environment because we don't want to kill all the butterflies and the ladybugs and the pollinators. So that's kind of why I went through with you why proper pest ID is important. Because, someone sees this and they're like, okay, I'm going to go spray my garden. I have something bad in there. You actually don't. This is good. You want to leave it. And so you're killing your friends here. So, of course, it also ends up looking like this for a little while. So it gets ugly, and then it's pretty. Of course, you see this? No, you don't want this. So now you know what an aphid looks like, and you're like, okay, let me try to figure out what I can do. And now instead of just going to the store and grabbing some spray to spray on the environment, you can try to go get some not some aphid larvae, some ladybug larvae, and try that. Try that as your first approach, and maybe that'll bring it down to a tolerable level. And now you got to use a much more sustainable option and a less aggressive approach. Of course, you see a dragonfly, it's not hurting anyone. Stink bug, yeah, we're going to want to control that. So, of course, just IDing, knowing what you're dealing with, proper identification. Oh yeah, hornworms, we do not want tomato hornworms. Get those out of there. Another really big part of integrated pest management is monitoring and assessing the numbers and the damage. So you can get sticky cards and they'll have like little like boxes on them, and the boxes you can easily count what's on there. But sometimes it'll even act as a trap for some beetles and other pests because they'll be attracted to the bright color and then they're stuck there. Of course, visual inspection, look for eggs, look for immature and adult insects. The earlier we catch it, the easier it is. It's easier to kill it when it's young and underdeveloped as opposed to when it's fully formed adult form and it's got stronger exoskeleton and we have to use harder control tactics. It's also important to develop an action threshold. So say one of your plants has like 2 or 3 aphids, you're not gonna be like, all right, time to go kill it, time to kill this whole plant. Kind of just keep an eye on it. Maybe that's as bad as it's gonna get. And if it gets worse, then okay, then we'll deal with it then. Just come up with a number or a threshold that you feel is acceptable for losing a little bit of prettiness in your garden or on your vegetables. But that kind of rounds out a little bit about what the program components are. You want to identify correctly. You're going to want to just keep an eye on it, figure out what point you're going to trigger some reaction. And then, of course, just you have so many tools at your disposal. Try to figure out if a combination of 2 is better than, bringing out a bottle of something and just nuking everything. So yeah, kind of bringing all of it again. Of course, we can prevent a lot of issues just by some cultural practices. Don't plant something that doesn't want to be out here because then it's going to have a very poor chance. And when plants don't perform well, then they're more susceptible to fungal issues, and fungal issues bring other insects. And so it's like I said before, it's like the plant's immune system. We want to have it in a good, healthy shape. That way it can fight off insects easier. There also are easier things you can do. So proper irrigation and plant spacing. If you have a sprinkler system that's going off all the time and the sun isn't drying it out, then it's going to be a very humid, moist environment. And we all know fungus really likes very wet, moist environments. And so you're just kind of asking for some fungal problems to kind of happen. Crop rotation, of course, is always recommended. Sometimes there's a disease that only likes one plant, and if you have that plant there every single year, that disease is just going to thrive and thrive and thrive. But if you plant something that disease can't feed on, you're going to starve it out. So try to do that. Here's a very poorly planted tree with girdling roots, and I'm sure that the canopy on that tree does not look very happy, and it's probably susceptible to so many other diseases just because it wasn't planted correctly. Here's like a cultural thing. So oleander aphids really like really moist environments. So if you reduce your level of watering, pruning, and fertilizing, you won't have a lot of tender shoots, and the aphids probably won't have any more tissue to feed on. So that's kind of a good way to, just kind of an example of something we could do that is considered integrated pest management. Of course, there are some mechanical options we can do. Mulch is great. It's going to keep the sun from reaching a lot of weed seeds, and when the weed seeds cannot have sunlight, they cannot germinate. So that'll reduce your weed numbers, and you're kind of getting ahead of the problem. You're setting yourself up for success. Soil solarization is going to be good for killing a lot of things. Of course, you put that tarp down, the sun beats down on it, and it's going to heat up that ground a lot more. And also traps. There's those little snail traps and baits that we have that are at our disposal as well. Kind of how I brought up before, that leaf miner and the tomato hornworms. If you see them, just cut them off. They're not going to really run away from you. So just squash them, kill them. That's always in your favor. Biological control, kind of back to those beneficial insects I was talking to you about earlier. We got parasitoids, we've got beneficial insects. Leave them alone. Let them do their job in your garden. Of course, there's conservation in mind. We don't want to kill our beneficials, so do try to avoid spraying insecticides when your beneficials are active. You don't want to kill them. They're your friends, like I said. Of course, we've got the predators, which are the beneficials I was talking to you about earlier. Parasitoids, I showed you some examples of that. I showed you all these examples. And of course, chemical, we would like it to always be our last option. Of course, we want to keep something very pest specific. So that's why I really emphasize knowing what you're dealing with. If you have an ID on exactly what it is, you can better get not a broad spectrum insecticide, get something that is super targeted and at what you're trying to kill, and that'll reduce damage to other beneficials in your garden. But remember, poison is still a poison, no matter if it's man-made or naturally occurring. I know a lot of people are like, oh, that's so, I know like Raid, which is a pyrethroid, people are like, oh, they're so bad, but pyrethrin is actually naturally derived, I believe, from orchids. There's a type of plant that we're getting it from somewhere, and it's still going to do damage and hurt things. So just remember
Chrysanthemums.
Chrysanthemums, thank you. Yeah, so here's just another couple of naturally derived insecticides. Neem oil, I know, is a really popular one. I talked about pyrethrins. Like I said, immature insects are more susceptible. The sooner we get to them, the better, because we won't have to use the big guns. And of course, we do have some stronger chemical controls, but just try to use it sparingly. A lot of the home landscapes that have the worst pest problems actually use the most pesticides, so be careful. And here are just a couple of tips that I found to maybe help reduce issues in your garden. This kind of just goes, it's going to be the same thing for the next few slides, but tips to reduce pesticide and fertilizer use on trees, shrubs, and perennials. Good soil preparation, till and compost before planting, plant things that are meant for the area, proper care, don't overwater, underwater, proper pruning, and mulching is always going to help. Tips to reduce pesticide and fertilizer use on lawns, proper irrigation, good mowing, and of course get a species that's gonna like the area you're in. And then tips to reduce pesticide and fertilizer use on vegetables, plant recommended varieties is kind of always the big one. Quickly and properly identify what pest you're dealing with, use the right method, and then plant it at a time that it's gonna thrive. And here are some websites that I find very helpful. Aggie Horticulture helps me every day in my job, but the Earthkind publications, of course, there's a whole tab for Earthkind for good proper plant selection and all that stuff. And of course, the Permian Basin Master Gardeners website, westtexasgardening.org, is always great for our area. 56 minutes. Just under the hour. Should be back now. Does anybody have any questions, comments, concerns?
Is there any type of app to identify insects? Because I've got one that help identify plants and stuff. But
Yeah, you can always send them to me. I don't mind looking at insects. I just use Google Photo. It's an app on my phone, like if I really don't know what it is. But yeah, Google Photos. You can upload the picture to it, and then there's a button you click and it will like scan it and it'll pull up on Google any images that are similar to it, and it can usually get you pretty close. Oh, I didn't realize people were talking in the chat box. Poor Flick. I think someone was, maybe whenever I was showing that ant being killed. I have several acres and was digging all around one about 2 weeks ago. There was white grubworms and hundred timers. Not sure if it was babies, but they thought they were everywhere. I was digging through the whole land, never seen this before. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's June bugs. I know June bugs like to really stay. Aaron Hurd was talking about digging. It sounds like it might be June bugs, because I know they are like white grubworms. Yes, I will have the recording available. I'll send it off to Nancy Donovan, and she should be able to email it out to you.